We could.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Parking Advisory Committee. Tina, can you provide us with a roll call? I am here.
Here.
All righty, thank you, Tina. Moving along to our agenda, we're going to open up the meeting for public comment at this time.
Have anybody that is calling in line that would like to make a comment? Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Anybody online that would like to give public comment? Nobody is in the room, so we can close public comment.
Excellent. Thank you, Tina. Moving along on our agenda, next, Gabriel Montez is going to introduce the new parking demand manager.
Good morning, everybody. So I want to introduce Ann Stedler. She is our new parking demand manager. Unfortunately, she was not able to make it this morning. So I do want to give you guys a little background about her. She most recently came from the city of Newark, where she was the community development director. She has over 40 years of municipal experience, a lot in redevelopment and development and connecting communities with cities. So we really do plan to leverage her and her robust experience in a municipal setting. Also, a lot of the high-level parking and transportation planning as it relates to our downtown core. She will be engaged in a lot of that work. And lastly, she will be working closely with Ben and Andrew as the project leads for this parking plan, the updating of the parking plan. So with that being said, I think we can move on.
All right, moving along, the next item on the agenda is the parking plan information session led by Gabriel Montez and Walker Consultants.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, we'll move along to our parking management area study and downtown parking plan. We have briefly discussed this last week. We kind of had a high-level overview. Thank you, Ben. High-level overview of our intentions to update the plan, kind of the scope of work, each phase that we will go into. And so I do want to start by next slide, please. Kind of going over what today's presentation will cover. So today we will talk briefly about the context of why we are updating the parking plan and also the importance of updating the study and parking plan. Also, we will talk about or briefly discuss a refresh of the charters, just to keep it top of mind. And then we'll also go into some additional topics outside of our charter. We will roughly discuss 10 topics and then, or go over, 10 topics, and then have a small discussion at the end to explore more some of those topics. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the topics, well, some of them will be familiar within our charter. Some of them will be new. So some of the reasons we had decided to update and the importance of why we are updating our plan is because there is a growing and changing downtown. As development continues, additional trip demand to the city center will increase, right? So as population grows, jobs grows, and housing grows, we fully expect the competing demands for the curb to grow further, right? And so we are essentially trying to think about the future and our transportation network, and in particular our downtown core. And as the development happens and the growth happens, how are we going to create framework that allows us to better manage the curb and access to the curb in general. We also view this as a way to manage trip demand and trip reduction, and in particular, single occupancy vehicles, right? Again, as demand increases, we fully expect higher need to manage trip demand and in particular single occupancy vehicles. This is also an opportunity for us to align parking and mobility around the city's commitment to climate action, equitable and affordable housing. And lastly, this plan will utilize best practices in parking demand management, active mobility strategies, and overall supporting the future. Next slide, please. So we will briefly, as I said, go over the current charter just as a refresh to keep it top of mind. Next slide, Ben. So briefly, the current charter covers, the current charter allows for this body to advise on parking topics related to analysis and studies, rules, regulations, and ordinances, parking rates and fines, also allocation of parking by classification, acquiring property for parking facilities, capital projects for parking, and other topics directed by City Council. Next slide. With that being said, I am going to pass it along to our lead project manager for the project, which is Ben Weber, and I'll let him introduce himself.
All right. Thank you very much, Gabe. Can all of you hear me okay? I'll
Yes.
assume yes. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
So,
All
hey,
right, yeah,
do you mind if I butt in? So, Tina, that link's not working for the meeting.
for some people not able to join.
Yeah, we called in. Jocelyn and I are both called in because we couldn't get on with the link. Anyway, that's fine. I mean, we can hear you fine though.
Okay. I've been noticing on my teams there are requests to admit people, so there might be some people waiting in the lobby. That's something I suppose you can look at from your end there. So, but yeah,
Kurt.
I think we're good, Ben. You can proceed.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much, PAC members, for your time today. I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm really excited to have Anne on board with the city as well. She's been great to work with since I met her 8 days ago now. But we'll have 8 more months or so of this project collaborating with her, the city team, and you all PAC members. So yeah, thank you so much. I think we're going to spend, the next 50 minutes or so here. I will try to quickly present and then really leave a lot of room for discussion here. But this is the first of 4 PAC meetings that you'll see me at. I'm joining virtually from New Mexico today, but I do live and work in Oregon, so you'll see me in person for some of these future meetings. And I'm from Walker Consultants, where I'm the project manager, and we're really in charge of the parking and curb management strategies component of this project. We also have a couple project partners, Alta Planning and Design, leading the active transportation and mobility hubs concept work that we'll hit on a little bit here today, and Enviro Issues, who's leading the comprehensive and equitable public participation elements of this. They're both based out of their Portland offices just across the river and are deeply familiar with the Vancouver environment. So I'm really happy to have them on the team, bringing their extensive knowledge of working with you all in the city on various projects over the last many years. So, in this study and plan, we're going to be considering a wide range of policy management and investment tools for parking services, the city overall, and in some cases, external partners. As Gabe mentioned, we've broken these topics into 2 areas, those that are core within your charter and those that are additional topics. which aren't currently in your official purview, but we believe, based on your experience and insights and knowledge about the city, you'll be able to offer some excellent advice and guidance on. So we can dive right into those. The first group here we're going to go through are the ones that are within your charter. These should be, fairly familiar to you as policy and management areas that you're providing guidance to, with the city. I know last month you helped Gabe and his team make decisions about parking rate and price increases at the waterfront and your garage lot 18. And some of those similar kinds of decisions and topics will be, on your plate and our plate as we go through this project the next year. So, we're going to be looking into a lot of strategies over the course of this project, but we're not seeking to be a hammer that's just mindlessly hunting around for nails. We want to match the methods that we advise to your needs of today and the needs we anticipate in your future, your rapidly changing future downtown. As we look at these tools, we'll be considering three elements. What conditions are we seeking to improve? How can any given strategy be impactful in Vancouver? And what is your capacity to implement the strategy or continue an existing strategy into the future? We're not interested in laying a bunch of strategies on your plate that are impractical or undesirable for you to implement and maintain in the long run. One thing, we're going to be looking at core topics like management objectives, regular parking management, but also events and surge parking demand, which are big issues in your community. Looking at enforcement periods, considering how technology can be of greater assistance in everything from parking payment and access control to enforcement and occupancy monitoring. Looking at things like your transient and daily, daily paid parking, but also your permit parking systems. And then how does this all feed into equitable access? That's really a lens we want to keep at the forefront as we go through this work. We know your new transportation system plan really infuses equity considerations throughout, and this includes prioritizing investment and travel choice in areas of Vancouver that show the most need based on your equity index. Parking and curb management and vehicular access to downtown is a key factor to consider in equitable access. But we also want to make sure that we're providing opportunities to enhance active mobility and transit access to downtown and throughout the region to provide a broader base of transportation choices in your community. We're going to dig more deeply into parking pricing strategy, namely really leading off with what are the objectives of parking pricing in your community. Pricing can be a demand management tool. It obviously raises revenue that helps cover operating costs. It can be something that influences travel choices and street traffic management, and so many other ways that parking influences or pricing influences people's choice to or to not drive any given day and what destinations within downtown they take advantage of. So we're going to look at pricing methods, static pricing, dynamic pricing, tier-based pricing. Those are all more nuanced ways of putting a dollar figure to every hour at the curb. We'll get into those in future meetings. We'll be considering time limits, and then we're going to look at the management and enforcement practices that the city may have the appetite for to make pricing effective and consistently applied. Parking supply is a big factor in Vancouver. You are a pretty active development environment right now. You have additions and subtractions of supply going on all over the place. In the waterfront, you have a lot of sort of temporary surface lots that are for sale right now with the intention of becoming vertical development. There's a big garage under construction in the waterfront right now. We know that the City Hall lot, I think as early as later this year, will be taken offline to become the waterfront gateway development. So the sheer quantity of parking supply is changing rapidly right now. And then this is to say nothing of, so your on-street supply. I know in recent years, you've removed parking on stretches of Mill Plain to put in bicycle lanes. You have an outdoor dining parklet program over the past couple of years. It's been sort of a COVID response. We're going to look into the parklet program and other alternative uses of curbside parking space. Then you have big projects such as Main Street Promise that will be occurring over the next couple of years. I know one of the big promises of Main Street Promise is no net change in parking supply. But during that construction period, there will be disruptions to the supply, and the eventual parking will be reconfigured. And that takes some getting used to. It's sort of part of the user experience of parking that people will adapt to as major capital projects occur. And then user experience is a key factor of this. I don't know if any of you PAC members are paid to think about parking in your day job. I hope not, but by virtue of you being on the PAC, we sort of think of you as super citizens of sorts. You can help speak on behalf of the wider Vancouver community to weigh in how you think parking management will impact the user experience. The typical person parking day to day is faced with issues like this. What are their payment methods? How do they know and learn where parking supply is? How do they find available spaces? What are the options for parking for people with disabilities? And then loading zones, electric vehicle charging, short-term curb uses. Those are all kind of the day-to-day factors. And we really want to keep that lens front of mind as we're exploring sometimes wonky policy and management practices. How does that actually influence the way people coming to Vancouver to park and use the curb kind of experience that on a day-to-day basis? So then bringing in sort of what we're calling additional topics or sort of extracurriculars. These are the areas that are maybe we'll call it the expanded universe that you all PAC members can help us work through over the course of this project this year. One big one is introducing curb management. Instead of kind of dealing with parking as a discrete and siloed practice, as represented in this image on the left, we want to expand our thinking to be more holistic, really thinking about curb management and all the different activities that can happen on your streets and curbside in your parking environment. A lot of these are things Vancouver's already tackling and implementing. We want to put a more well-rounded lens on it to understand the competing demands for this really valuable curbside space in the public realm. And so we're going to be looking at how parking and curb management relates to the city's intentions to create, movement space like bicycle lanes or transit-only lanes, maybe areas for goods or loading, freight delivery zones at the curb, more space for people and green space and landscaping. So those parklets we mentioned, that's an extension of an outdoor business area, stormwater facilities, landscaped areas, curb extensions. Those are all physical assets that could be a replacement or maybe a replacement for parking spaces in certain areas. Passenger zones like transit stops or Uber and Lyft pickup and drop-off zones, are becoming an increasingly popular official designation at the curb in some cities. And then finally, just expanding our definition of what parking means and kind of switching over to a mindset of storage. Like, yeah, there will be some static uses of the curb. Parking's not going away and vehicles will still sit there. but you may also have bicycle parking corrals or scooter share docks that take up some of that space at the curbside. So these are just some of the uses we want to kind of integrate into our thinking about a holistic look at the curb. We're going to explore tools like parking benefit districts. This is a method of establishing a physical geographic boundary in your downtown or elsewhere, and then taking the revenue from that paid parking and more deliberately reinvesting and spending it locally on improvements to that area. Could be streetscapes, could be street beautification, storefront improvements. It's a really wide range of options for reinvesting that money. And so we want to explore, if this is a tool that Vancouver is interested in and what geographies might be suitable for it. And I think understanding that because it's shifting money around in specific ways, parking benefit districts are also a bit of a political tool. And so trying to understand the implications of that. Also within this realm, just thinking about managing parking geographically, Vancouver does have an official parking management area. And we want to explore, what should that boundary be in the future? Is there a need to change it, to expand it or contract it? And what tools exactly are available within the parking management area that might not be available without that designation? So that's sort of a boundary and a policy, two sides of one coin that we're going to be exploring through this work. We want to look at ways of more efficiently using parking. Parking quantity is one thing, and then who has access to the existing parking is the other big factor when we're thinking about parking efficiency. So we're going to look at shared parking, both long-term and short-term arrangements to make existing parking available to a wider range of users. This could be to help a project fulfill its minimum parking requirements by taking advantage of underutilized parking that's nearby or off-site. So there's kind of shared agreements that can be formulated there. There's also short-term options. Any given Saturday, you may need flexibility to share parking to accommodate surging demand during the farmers market. So we're going to look at that from both angles. And then there's public-private partnering, which is sort of joint ventures for agencies, maybe city agencies and private developers to link together to develop or acquire parking with the explicit goal of sharing the cost and operational burdens of the parking, and then in turn, sharing the supply that's produced through that effort. All at the aim of making parking use more efficient instead of necessarily just increasing supply without trying to be more mindful about taking advantage of the supply that exists today and using it more economically. We know the city has efforts going on right now in other departments, trying to look at parking minimums and maximums, the parking requirements in your development code. Through this study, we are not providing a code rewrite of your development code, but we will help you look holistically at your entire parking supply, privately supplied, publicly supplied, management improvements, and your development pipeline, so you can better understand how parking requirement changes would impact parking options and overall mobility choices to downtown and the broader city. And then finally, speaking of mobility, we'll be looking at mobility hubs, which are kind of a wild card topic today. We'll be exploring how mobility hubs as a physical place and a place with synchronized operations can integrate lots of different modes of travel in a kind of a one-stop shop place that makes it easier to get around. We'll be looking at mobility hub options and opportunities today, to link together services like parking, car share, bike and scooter share. A little bit of feedback there, but I think that's gone now. All right. Bus depots and bus service and the like. And then we're also going to seek to anticipate how big future projects or transportation changes to the Vancouver area, such as if light rail arrives a decade from now, could those stations be the anchors of your mobility hub? And how do you take advantage of light rail and other kind of regional transportation choices to make these hubs, useful places to link together both long distance and sort of last mile type trips? So that's the quick 1, 2, 3 on those 10 topics that Gabe mentioned. We're going to get into discussion here, really pretty shortly for the remainder of this meeting. But just wanted to give you a heads up that in the remaining 3 meetings, that you'll see me at, and members of our other consultant partners will be joining for some of those. We're going to get into topics like looking at the survey results for the community survey that we'll be launching in the next few weeks, as well as reviewing the parking occupancy data, which are numbers we're crunching right now. And then we're going to be coming out to Vancouver in April to do some private parking counts. We're going to consider the vision and goals for this overall study, and we're going to want your PAC member review of some of the preliminary parking principles update work that we prepare. Then we're really going to roll our sleeves up on strategies and initiatives, kind of taking the 10 topics we discussed today, plus others, and actually putting those into a framework of what makes sense for Vancouver and how do all these strategies and tools work together to create a more coherent parking and curb management system. And then taking this study and plan, all the way through adoption. We'll have a couple city council meetings over the course of this project, and we want you all to be, reviewing and advising on the substance of this work as well, across the entire path. So with that, that's really the conclusion of what I have to present. It's great that we have 30 more minutes here to get into discussion. And we just want to introduce these 3 prompt questions. What existing parking and curb conditions should we keep front of mind? What study and plan outcomes are most important to you? And what topic or topics introduced today excite you most about this study and plan? So these are 3 key prompts, but of course we kind of welcome a freewheeling conversation at this point to help us, in this first meeting with you all, find our footing and understand, what your priorities are, or what this plan can achieve, and what kind of changes and improvements to your parking and curb management system you're interested in this plan helping you achieve. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. I'll start off with my thoughts on the presentation. First off, thank you for the work with this, and I really think that it's the city's doing a great job by creating sort of a comprehensive plan for parking. So I really appreciate the work everyone's done on this. One of the most important things that I took away is you had mentioned efficiency, and I think that efficiency with parking is something that we would certainly want to see in any parking plan. You had mentioned a really critical point that it's not just about increasing supply to make parking more efficient. It's about being smart with the resources that we have when it comes to parking. And so I think when we are efficient with that, we can meet our climate action goals, and we can also create a parking plan that benefits everybody. It benefits the residents, it benefits the businesses, and it benefits our environment by making sure that we are being very efficient with the resources that we have. So I really appreciate you bringing up efficiency.
Of course, yeah. Ryan, is that you speaking?
That is.
Okay. I'm sorry I can't see everyone, so if you wouldn't mind saying your name before you speak, at least the first time around, so I
No
can
problem.
recognize your voices. Thank you so much. Other thoughts around the table there?
Yeah, this is Jason speaking. I guess I don't need to get that close. Yeah, just also, plus one to what Ryan said. Yeah, I think I've been lucky enough to travel to some places a good amount around the world and seeing what other places have done, and to efficiency, there are places where I've probably seen hardly any street parking, but a parking structure that is well highlighted to people coming to that area, and you never hear about people having parking issues. So it seems like that's the direction that efficiency and wayfinding is what seems to be a key part of this project. And I think that's a great way to use land properly and efficiently, and also solve the problem of which some people have of not being able to find parking, and also looking to the future and how other people do now, and also plan to change their method of movement. So moving away from personal vehicular travel and going to transit, walking, and active mobility. So I think those are really important topics to consider as well. So I appreciate that being incorporated into the project.
Absolutely.
Input that I would also give as somebody who lives in the jurisdiction of the Parking Advisory Committee is that I find that surface parking lots do not tend to foster a great deal of community or activation. And so I think that when we think about our parking management plan and study, thinking about that, how we use parking to build community and activation in our spaces is really important as well.
Jason again. So I primarily bicycle to get around Vancouver. And one thing I find with parking is the safety aspect of it. Some of the bicycle lanes, I know bicycle lanes aren't the area of your focus, but incorporating them. And so I think that component of safety is something to consider as well, not just, and I saw in the presentation this a lot of shared space between vehicle and bicycling, and sometimes you don't have that width, but to consider yes, the safety of mobility users and pedestrians when it comes to parking. There's some bike lanes where it's very easy for you to get doored, and or cars will pull in or park in the bike parking, and now you're dodging vehicles. And so I think that's an important safety aspect. Maybe physical barriers or designing mobility lanes at a curb elevation, if that falls into the jurisdiction of the project, be something to look at as well.
Yeah, that's important to know. And we won't be designing bike lanes through this project, and we'll only be looking at the bikeway network at kind of a 30,000 foot level. But we will be looking more in depth at where parking demand exists or is very slack today, and how that demand may change in the future, and what that leads to for opportunities, to reconfigure streets to bring in more active transportation lanes and facilities. As you're making those trade-offs between just allocating physical space in the roadway, are there places where parking removal could be really tolerable and acceptable in order to bring in more people space and more active transportation opportunities. So So that coming at it from kind of that angle is definitely within our purview.
And can I ask if you put the slideshow back on, just so I want Kurt and
Yeah.
Jocelyn to be able to see the questions that were presented.
Sure. All right, is that back up?
Thank you.
So yeah, this is Kurt, Ben, thanks for your presentation. I'm looking forward to your study and just to see what you find, what the current trends are. You know, our office was downtown. We moved a year and a half ago, and we were having all kinds of issues with parking for employees and for clients. Clients stopped wanting to come to our office. So, and it seems like a lot of the emphasis on parking downtown has been on visitors and on the residents, which is really important. I just want to make sure the business interests are being protected because you don't want to lose all your businesses downtown.
Mhm. No, that's good to know. And we didn't dive deeply into our public involvement scope, just in the last 30 minutes, but we do have a number of activities, several community surveys, a number of small group discussions that we'll be doing over the next few months. And we're definitely going to make sure that the business community, downtown property owner community are represented in those conversations. 'Cause it's not always as black and white a conversation with those folks who, who very much rely on people being able to drive and park to their business in many cases.
This is Jocelyn Cross. I work downtown and would like to reiterate what Kurt said. On a weekly basis, we have clients coming to our building wondering where they can park. So that's definitely an ongoing issue. But I do like that you're looking at the parking minimum and maximums. I think that is something that we need to look at with future development.
Definitely. Yeah. Jocelyn, are your clients seeking or your customers seeking dedicated parking for your business? Or are they maybe just more uncertain about the broader publicly available parking downtown?
Well, specifically for our building, so there's several businesses within our building, and it's a constant thing that we also see a lot of older people that don't want to walk blocks and blocks to go meet with their financial planning folks or their
Mhm.
tax consultant, and so they're looking for something that it's more short term than anything, and so
Mhm.
that always seems to be an issue.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that spectrum of different types of parking users is really important to keep in mind. There's folks who drive every single day. I'm sure many of the employees and staff at your business do, but then many of your clients may come to downtown just a few times a month or a few times a year. And it's a very different parking experience, um, depending on how familiar and how regular you are with it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Something else that was mentioned that I think is always important to highlight in any work the city does is making sure that our plan is equitable.
Mhm.
And that is across socioeconomic lines. It's also across the ability for all members of Vancouver to use and enjoy the benefits that we have here in the Parking Advisory Committee area. So I'm glad to see that that was included, and want to make sure that we make sure that we are being intentional about those efforts.
Great. I'm glad to hear that's front of mind for you all. Equity in any realm, and especially in transportation, can be hard to define up front. It's one of those things that you kind of explore in fits and starts throughout the whole process. And equity means very different things for different users and different audiences. So will be really interested in just raising the equity topic with you all every time we talk, to kind of make sure this is passing the sniff test and that you feel that the parking and curb management strategies we're exploring, are widening the opportunities for people to get to and from downtown, um, in safe and affordable ways. Jocelyn, you mentioned the parking minimums and maximums, and it's sort of my understanding the city is looking at that, in different departments or kind of on a parallel track. Um, I wonder if that's been a topic you all in the PAC have tackled before, or city staff, if you could speak a little bit more about what the city has underway looking at those requirements.
I'm not exactly sure what the city's planning for this. I know I've had some conversations about revising that downtown parking requirements, just to better suit what we're seeing today, versus when it was written quite a long time ago.
This is Patrick Quinton, online. The city is looking at parking minimums, parking requirements, as part of the comprehensive plan. That's citywide, so it'll include downtown. So I know there's a lot of conversations about that, about what's necessary to incentivize additional development, what's needed, for given the other available options for people, to commute. So it's being looked at.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's something our work will try to tie in with over the
Yep.
next 8 months or so. Yeah, but Patrick, you mentioned, incentivizing development, making housing more plentiful and affordable and whatnot. And that sort of spins up into a bigger picture notion here, is that, parking is not the destination. Housing and businesses and parks and entertainment are the destination, and driving and parking is just one tool to access that. And if owners' parking requirements are a barrier to creating those vibrant people serving spaces, that's a big reason for rethinking, those parking minimums in particular, and how parking can be a barrier to development, not just cost wise, but as someone mentioned earlier, surface lots are not attractive and they don't contribute to the urban realm and the beauty and experience of downtown. Um, so kind of coming at it from all those perspectives.
Jason here again. Yeah, I completely agree. I think we've been seeing a lot of studies recently too with parking minimums, and I've heard it from local business owners too, or people that want to be, but where minimum parking is a barrier to opening up a business. So I think that's great to revisit that. And I had a question in terms of looking at private lots. Yeah, they're surface lots, and they're definitely an eyesore, and I don't think contribute much. But are we looking at? I think Vancouver, in particular, downtown has a lot of, it seems, unused or abandoned surface lots. Are we looking at? You mentioned some cooperation between those private lots and the city, and I'm wondering, yeah, to what extent will you be looking at those, and how that's all going to function, especially in response to the housing and the comprehensive plan for the city.
Right. So, yeah, we'll be doing an analysis and, counts, going out and physically counting the utilization of the private off-street lots. I think we have about 204 lots in our inventory right now, and we're still counting. So it's over 4,000 private spaces. So you're right. It's a major land use. Um, you know, this plan doesn't compel, obviously, private landowners and private parking owners to make changes. to those assets. But we do want to look for, areas where there's maybe congested private parking or underutilized private parking, just to understand kind of the overall utilization case, and then find those opportunities for, more efficient deployment of parking, shared parking opportunities, and just kind of cracking open the conversation about, hey, there are acres and acres and acres of parking lots and spaces that are almost never used, maybe in some regions of the downtown parking area. Um, that should give the city, a better understanding of where redevelopment opportunities may be able to occur, or if redevelopment is occurring in some of the busier areas, where parking could kind of be relocated or redistributed, to think about parking not just as one parking lot per one destination, but parking as more of a shared asset, across neighborhoods or across, numerous adjacent blocks. So kind of coming at it from all those angles. And I think I even understand, the city is about to launch a project on like a site development readiness audit. Um, and so we'll be interested, I think, informally to kind of link up this parking study and the findings about utilization or low use, with what the city is trying to do to understand development opportunities in the downtown area.
Thank you, Ben. And just to clarify, did you say over 200 lots and 4,000 private parking spots just in downtown, or is that in all of Vancouver?
This is just the downtown parking management area. Yeah. Which, is the waterfront, downtown, government, Esther Short, parts, the uptown area. So it's a couple hundred blocks, but it's a big load of private parking that we've got tracked in our spreadsheet.
And I would add that, I like the way Ben put it in terms of just cracking and starting the conversation, right? But we're also looking at the framework to actually partner with them, right? I think that in our research, and Andrew and I's research, we were looking at other cities, and in particular, Sonoma, city of Sonoma in California sticks out to me, where there were three particular specific examples of how they can work with private lots, right? Like possibly leasing the lot and bringing it into your network, or working with them where maybe the municipality takes on the enforcement piece and shares the revenue, things like that. So we're looking at kind of creating that framework that if we were to partner with private owners in the future, we kind of have that laid out of how that would actually work.
Yeah, and the next time you all see me, which is probably 2 or 3 months away, we'll have a lot more analysis of the parking utilization. Gabe sent us a whole bunch of public parking counts that his enforcement officers have been conducting over the last year. So we're going to crunch those numbers. And then in mid-April, me and my team will be on site there counting utilization at the private locations. So we'll have more results on, hot spots and cold spots, in terms of where people are parking today.
Any further comments?
Oh, I had one. The I'm getting an echo now. I don't know where it's coming from. So yeah, was listening to some of the comments about the minimum parking being a barrier to development. I just want to point out on the other side, after representing developers for the last 40 years of my life, a lot of times not having enough parking's a bigger barrier to development than having to have parking, because if people can't get there, the development won't happen. So I just want to make sure we look at both sides of that.
Yeah, and this is Jocelyn, just to add to that, when we're building these apartment projects, if they're not adequately parked, you're gonna have vacancy. You're not gonna have everybody renting, if they don't have a place to park their car. So it is an issue, and it's something, that I'm working on right now with an active project, downtown.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I mean, our team.
Just to weigh in on that, parking minimums don't require developments to not have parking. Or right. So when we lower minimums, it doesn't mean that you can't build more parking. It's just the city doesn't mandate that. And we're finding now more often is the case that developments will build more parking than we require for this reason. So I just want to make sure it's clear that we're not requiring less parking. We're just saying if you choose not to, you don't have to build the parking. So
Yeah, I thank you, Patrick. It's just sometimes there's maximums put on businesses that there's maximum parking thresholds, which then become a problem. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that the city was trying to prevent us from adding parking. That's not the case at all.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure the city, as in considering changing minimums, is also looking at the maximums conversation, but really with the theme of sort of giving more flexibility to developers to make that decision about how much parking to provide for themselves. Yeah, are there any other thoughts or sort of gut reactions to any of those 10 topics? Anything that surprised you or catches your interest that you'd want us to dive into deeper next time?
Yeah. Does the study, just out of curiosity, does it assume, does it assume any type of ownership of mode of transportation amongst the people that live in the downtown area or the project area? For example, does it make any assumption of X many percent of people will own a vehicle or X many percent of people will take transit or walk? Is there some share of expected mobility usage or projection that's taken into account for the study?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we're documenting existing conditions right now, which includes, observing and keeping track of vehicle ownership as best we can know it, mode share choices as best we can know it today. And then projecting into the future is always more art than science. And that's a decision or something we would link up with a lot of different city departments to try to get those assumptions kind of locked in, not least of which the group that just finalized the transportation system plan. So there's potentially a number of scenarios we could anticipate, high, low, medium car ownership or active and transit use shares there. But then also coming at it from the other side and discussing, okay, what in terms of parking management can be influential for influencing mode share, because we know that the availability of parking, the price of that parking is a factor in, people's decision to own a car if they live downtown or to drive into downtown if they're coming in for, to do business as a customer or as an employee. So we can be both reactive and at least discuss kind of proactive ways that parking and curb management, shapes mode share and mode choice. I know that was maybe a bit of a vague answer because it can be a little bit of a chicken and the egg type topic. but we will be working with you all to really home in on, the city's broader development and mobility goals, and looking at where parking management can influence change in that direction.
Thank you.
And one final point I would have is just for all of us to remember that this parking management plan is envisioning what we think, Vancouver will look like in 20 years, 30 years, not
Mhm.
necessarily what it has looked like in the last 20 years or 30 years. And so when we think about all of the things that go into this parking plan, we do have to be forward thinking about that. And that's both with realities of climate change, and that's with realities of a much more sort of urbanist sort of development here in downtown Vancouver than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's a great reminder.
Yeah, and my last question, I want to echo that because increasingly the people that I know here and have known, and including myself, have become increasingly, they've moved away from car ownership. And I think one of the slides mentioned car sharing, which would be fantastic, and I think would open up the possibility for many people to essentially get rid of their vehicles. And I think that sort of movement or that projection in the future should definitely be taken into account in the study. Yeah, and I hope the car sharing does come, because that would be absolutely incredible. I think that also lends itself to equity. That's a lot more money in people's pockets and money that will be spent at local businesses. So I think that's a very valuable piece of the project, which I hope to see. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, that duality of owning your means of transportation versus having access to many means of transportation is a big difference there. And if there are scenarios where owning a car becomes less necessary for certain people because of car sharing, Lyft, Uber, who knows, autonomous vehicles in 20 or 30 years, transit options, better bike lanes, uh, that's definitely, within the range of scenarios we're going to be looking at.
I know we're running short on time here. I did want to present to the group a couple things for our next meeting. One is the election of our chair. I would like to move forward with that in our next meeting, so we'll put that on the table. I think Ryan has been doing a great job, but we will officially need to make a election in our next meeting. So I want to put that on the table. And then the other thing, which we can discuss via email, is that the potential for maybe extending a couple of our PAC meetings in the future with the consultants. If the group is open to it, maybe a 90-minute session again in the future. We can discuss the details of the timing and if that is even possible. But you should see an email from me here in the next week or so discussing that topic. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Excellent. Well, if there's not any further comments, we can close this meeting. Thanks so much for everybody for being here. And please enjoy that first 70-degree weather day that we're going to have here in Vancouver. The city usually comes alive on that day, so I'm looking forward to it. And I hope you are as well.
Enjoy, everyone. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.